Does anyone else feel like it's weird that Metroid Dread just completely tossed out the arc they set up in Fusion about Samus going against the Federation who's always hiring her? I mean, I love Raven Peak, and I am very glad that both the X-Parasites and Samus's Metroid DNA got to play a major role in Dread. Just generally, the whole package of Dread's story was just awesome. But like, what about the Federation, man? Dread's ideas were all shelved back in 2006 before being revived by Mercury Steam after technology got back on track, but a lot of those ideas could have been repurposed for a game that served as Metroid 6 and took place after the Corrupt Federation arc. Dread can still be made in 2021, albeit with some major story differences that it can fit after this game, but this version of Metroid 5 that I'm pitching to you all right now would be made on the 3DS at around 2015-2016, and it would be made by Next Level Games, the studio who at one point wanted to make a 2D Metroid game for the DS, but then ended up shelving the idea and later ended up wasting their talents on instead making Federation Force. In this kind of alternate universe I'm talking about, however, they would have been making Metroid 5 instead of Federation Force. And in case you guys are thinking, oh no, the Federation Force team? No way they can make something actually good. It was made by the same people who made Luigi's Mansion 3 and Dark Moon. I am confident in Next Level Games' abilities. So, I would like to present to all of you my pitch for AMFS, another Metroid Fusion sequel. Okay, for real though, it would be called Metroid Insurgence, and it would focus on Samus facing the consequences of her disobedience at the end of Fusion and going up against the corrupt Federation military. And for those of you in the comments who are saying that it's only a small faction in the Federation that's corrupt, I'll get to that in a bit. I'll get to that. I'll get there. I'll get there. Anyways, you know the drill. First, I'll tell you guys the game intro, then I'll tell you the mechanics and style and what the game is like in general, and then I'll run through the game start to finish, telling you guys the game's story and design as I go. This game opens not with a Super Metroid style recap like Dread does, but instead with a reading of classified Galactic Federation documents that recap the events of Fusion instead. It starts out with a file on Samus Aran, describing her as armed with alien technology and extremely dangerous, and then describes her as a bounty hunter formerly allied with the Federation who helped them through the Metroid and Phazon crises, but then committed treason following the BSL incident and the discovery of the X. Multiple bounty hunters have been dispatched to track down Samus Aran, but none have reported back. It then switches to a file on the X-Parasites, describing their abilities to consume and mimic any life form, and how they resurfaced and took over SR-388 after the Metroids were exterminated following several attempts by the Federation's enemies to weaponize them. They then state how they were lucky that the Federation had a Metroid cloning program of their own, and as a result, they were able to use the cells to make a vaccine for the X-Parasites, which was tested on Samus following her infection by the X during a mission on the surface of SR-388. Then we switch to the third classified file on the BSL incident. This file describes the X outbreak on board the station that was the primary site where the Metroids were being researched and cloned, which Samus was sent to quell. As the outbreak continued, the Federation was greatly impressed by the military potential of the X, so they sent a squad to procure samples of the X in some of their most powerful forms. Samus believed the risk of this mission was too high, however, so she disobeyed orders and crashed the BSL station into the X's home planet of SR-388, destroying both the planet and the station, and all of the X along with them. This act of treason did prevent any further potential outbreaks of X-Parasites among innocent populations, but it also went against the Federation's goal of studying these life forms to utilize their near-limitless potential. However, the Federation's mission to the BSL was not entirely fruitless, as when the Federation arrived at the destroyed remains of planet SR-388, they found something there that was of great interest floating out in space, that appeared to have been expelled from the space station just in time to stay out of the explosion's blast radius. Exactly what the Federation found here is not elaborated on until later. The camera then zooms out, revealing that these Federation files were actually being displayed on a monitor, and being read by none other than Samus. Cut to Samus's gunship, located somewhere called the Pharaoh region of space. Her gunship, while the same as before, has been given a new paint job so that it has the classic colors again. Adam comes up on a display and tells Samus that this was all the information he could hack out of the Federation database before being locked out. A Fusion-style internal monologue communicates to us that Samus has been on the run for 6 months now, and while she's been able to handle everything the Federation throws at her without too much difficulty, Having to spend this much time steering clear of galactic civilization has been rough. So now, Adam has begun the process of hacking the Federation database in order to possibly find something that Samus could use to expose the Federation military for their wrongdoings during the PSL incident and clear her name. First, she could post some of her own footage of that incident, because her power suit records everything. But if she did that, then it would be immediately claimed fake by the Federation, and all the footage analysts are on the Federation's payroll, so they would say, yeah, this shit fake. So she can't just post her own footage. She needs to get some documents that the Federation themselves have. However, Adam says that the data he has procured isn't quite enough. Even if these documents were proven to be legitimate, which they most likely would be, it still wouldn't be enough. Cloning and studying Metroids is technically well within the Federation's rights, and it makes sense for them to do so after the Metroids were used against them so many times. And as for the X, while the military's actions were incredibly reckless and would have almost certainly led to the X consuming all of civilization if Samus hadn't intervened, these files don't give nearly enough information on the X and how dangerous they actually are to properly incriminate the Federation military on how they almost doomed the galaxy. Were this information to come to light, the Federation could almost certainly spin this story in their favor and continue the manhunt for Samus. However, there is still a lead Samus could pursue to expose the Federation. The files mention that the Federation's ship found something from the BSL station just outside of SR-388's blast radius. It is risky, but Adam's databanks contain a lot of information on classified Federation military bases, and he's able to calculate where they'd most likely take this discovery with around a 96% certainty. He believes that it's located at a classified Federation military outpost dedicated to military research and development, located on a former Chozo planet named Vareth. If Samus can infiltrate the base and extract the data they have on this discovery they found, she could leak the information and get the bounty on her head removed and halt any more ongoing corrupt Federation projects in their tracks. Adam asks the classic,
Any objections, lady?
Samus has none, and they set a course. And now this is the part where I ask you if you have any objections to subscribing. Please, this stuff takes so long to make. I need it to be worth it, please. Samus flies her ship as close as she can to planet Vareth, and Adam gives her the rundown. The Federation base on Vareth is a stronghold that's surrounded by anti-aircraft turrets that pack a wallop and will make approaching this base directly nigh impossible without getting shot down. Alongside that, the entire planet is surrounded by defense satellites built to destroy any potential planet killers that the Federation's enemies may try to drop on Vareth. These satellites will also blast any regular unauthorized ships entering the atmosphere, and Samus's ship is marked as a wanted vessel. So if Samus wants to enter the planet, then she'll have to do it in a crash landing. Adam calculates a path of trajectory where the defense satellite will only clip Samus's ship instead of vaporizing it, and then calculates a good crash landing spot that's close enough to the Federation base, so Samus won't need to hike across half the planet, but far enough so that the defense turrets near the base won't blast her ship to smithereens. They take a deep breath and speed into Vareth's atmosphere at full throttle. Satellites detect them immediately, but with Samus' ship going at full speed and taking evasive action, they're having trouble landing a shot. Eventually, they clip a wing with one of their death lasers, and the ship goes down fast. Adam manages to level out the ship, but it is a rough landing. The ship lands in a canyon, with a decent portion of the ship's starboard edge having been completely disintegrated after the satellite blast. Those things are powerful. The rest of the ship is in really rough shape from the landing, and it looks like it won't be usable again anytime, ever. Samus herself is mostly unhurt, aside from being a little dirty. Adam's hard drive is still intact, but the ship is too destroyed for him to run on it anymore, so Samus downloads Adam onto her suit and takes him with her since the ship is useless now. And now, after that long-ass intro sequence is done, the stage is set! So, game mechanics. As it just so happens, Samus's power suit has sustained a good bit of damage over the months she's been on the run, and while she has been doing low-budget maintenance on it and it's been slowly repairing from its liquid fusion, there's only so much Samus can do on her own without the Chozo or the Federation. So, she's lost most of her upgrades in a variety of incidents over the months. It's not one specific thing that happens at the start, or right before the start of the game this time. A lot of shit has happened between this and Fusion. She only has her base set of her Morph Ball, missiles, bombs, and Charge Beam. Now, this was formerly a Chozo planet. It's one of the reasons the Federation built their base here. So Samus is relying on hopefully being able to regain a lot of abilities during this mission. However, there is also a large slew of new upgrades belonging to the Federation that you'll find in this mission. One ability will be the Proximity Bouncer, an upgrade that, when activated, will deal severe knockback to all enemies within a certain radius of you, if not on cooldown. Another upgrade is the Spread Beam, which adds a sort of shotgun blast effect when you shoot an enemy from up close. The Shock Bomb will electrify the surface you're standing on and shock everyone else who's standing on that surface. Now, you're probably noticing something. A lot of these upgrades are mostly based around when the enemies are right up close. What's with that? Well, that's all in service of this next upgrade, which serves as the game's main hook, the Blade Beam. This game is giving Samus a melee attack. Not a melee counter, a melee attack. The Blade Beam is an upgrade gained early on that allows Samus to extend 2 feet of pure plasma out of her arm cannon, and use it to slash around at the enemies that come up close. It's pretty basic, there's no extra special moves outside of the basic slash attacks, aside from the other upgrades I mentioned that work well in tandem with it during close combat. The slash move is activated with the X button just like the melee counter is, but it's done much quicker than the melee counter, and because of that it's easier to hammer in several slashes in quick succession. Switching from the Blade Beam to normal power shots is as easy as switching between spamming the X button to spamming the Y button. Alright, it's instantaneous. So you'll never have to worry about wasting time trying to switch from melee to ranged weaponry while you're getting shot at, which will still happen a lot. Now, to service this mechanic, there's a lot of melee enemies as well. Wild aliens, of course, but also Federation Marines with blade beams of their own, and the occasional mech suit berserker enemy. This doesn't mean shooting is useless though, as there are still many enemies, both Wild and Federation Marines, who will use ranged attacks against you, and the time spent in melee combat will only let you appreciate the shooter combat more, which will still be the majority of the time, by the way. Oh, also, in terms of other new upgrades, I'm stealing the Flash Shift, Spin Boost, Storm Missiles, and Spider Magnet from Dread. That game doesn't exist yet in this universe, so just try to stop me, just try. You ain't doing it. Those upgrades are in this game. Most of the rest of this game's upgrades will be Samus's classic upgrades. Although, there will be a sort of adaptation of Samus's scanners in this game, handled the same way that they were in AM2R. In that game, when you entered a new area that the game wanted to give you lore on, your suit would automatically scan the area and provide you with the option to see the information. Or you could just ignore it and keep running around. The choice was yours. This game will do the same thing. As for the controls, this is a 3DS game, so it will all need to make sense mapped to the 3DS controller. The top screen is gameplay, while the bottom screen has the world map and your HUD information like in Samus Returns. It won't have the button to switch from beam types or missile types like in Samus Returns, but it will have a button to let Adam speak when he has information for you, since he's downloaded onto your suit now instead of on your ship. In terms of face buttons, Y to shoot, B to jump, X to use the blade beam, and A to use the flash shift. The L button toggles standstill free aim, the R button is used to toggle missiles on and off, and the minus button is used to cycle through missile types, since the super missiles do not stack onto regular missiles in this game, as that is a terrible mechanic that allows you to forget you were ever even using super missiles to begin with. I can't believe Fusion and Dread did that. That just sucked. Pressing up on the D-pad will toggle or untoggle your grapple beam, and pressing down on the D-pad will drop a shock bomb, which, by the way, is part of Samus's normal arsenal, not a Morph Ball upgrade. In terms of design, this game will simultaneously be more like Fusion than Dread was, and more non-linear than Dread was. More non-linear because, well, you know how Dread often silently railroads the player in a single direction by blocking off all other directions? This game will still need to do that sometimes, but not nearly as much, and often the way forward will be quite out of the way. The exception for that will be in sequences where you need to travel to other areas, since this game will have a decently strong degree of separation between different areas. And so sequences when you need to go back and forth will be more defined. Now, how will it be more like Fusion, you may ask? Well, throughout most of the game, Adam will be creating waypoints to tell you where to go and what to do there. However, before you guys start pissing out about linearity, allow me to tell you one tiny detail that makes this very different from Fusion. In Fusion, missions were short and Adam gave you a new objective with new directions very frequently. In this game, You often won't reach the area Adam marked on your map until like an hour after Adam tells you where to go. Adam will tell you what the final objective of that area is going to be, show you where that is, and then you spend a bunch of time exploring every nook and cranny of the entire area and a different area. And then after an hour and a half, at most probably, you'll finally wind up where Adam told you about earlier. Aside from the beginning and end when things are happening more rapidly, Adam will probably only give you a location to go like 4 or 5 times throughout the game. Now, he'll remind you of your objective a few times, especially when you're getting close, but for the most part, Adam's map markers serve more as a, this is an objective you need to complete at some point, than a, go do this right now, we are being linear thing. It's just because, in this game, there's more you need to do to progress than just get upgrades. There's actual things you need to complete. As for sequence breaking stuff, the infinite wall jump will be possible, but it will be much trickier than in Super Metroid and Zero Mission. Just in general, there will be a good bit of sequence breaking options, but there's no like reverse order boss stuff. It's all pretty minor ways to get ahead, since this game is a bit more structured and there's objectives to complete other than getting upgrades, like I said. Then there is this game's general style and tone. In this hypothetical scenario, I believe this would be a late 3DS game, so it would most likely have the same-ish art style as Metroid Samus Returns, though probably a bit more polished than that since this game would have had more development time than that game did. Also, Samus would have the same suit design as in Dread. As for tone, I think I want to probably lighten this game up a bit in comparison to the rest of the series' darker tone. Now, I love how dark Metroid can be sometimes, but I also feel like that it may be a big reason why Metroid sales have struggled in the past. Dark and moody Space Marine shooter games don't really fit in with Nintendo's general target audience, especially not the audience of the 3DS, which was probably one of Nintendo's most kid-oriented systems. Now, this doesn't mean I want to turn Metroid into a cartoon like Mario or Kirby. God, no. I'm just thinking this game should tone it down to about the same level as your average Zelda game, like Breath of the Wild. I just want something that can get rated E10 instead of T, like Samus Returns was. Samus Returns was rated E10. Less emphasis on fear or chaos or sadness or even just general dreariness, and more emphasis on a wondrous atmosphere and the grand, lush, and colorful environments and atmosphere, again, that many Metroid games like Prime are known for. Many core elements of the Metroid series can work great with younger audiences, while still sticking to what makes Metroid, Metroid. Keep this game's color palette vibrant with its complex environments. Now, I know that part at the beginning seemed kind of dark, but when done in practice, I'm hoping it could be played off more as like a whimsical space adventure against tyranny, like in, Star Wars, and less of a tense and desperate situation for Samus. Now, despite that, I do want this game to have a very cinematic edge. Corruption was the finale to the Prime trilogy, and it finished it off with a bang and a grand climactic atmosphere. As this game would be the finale to the core 2D Metroid saga, just like Dread was, except Dread would also exist in this universe after this game, so I guess it isn't the finale to the core 2D Metroid saga, but shush. I'm thinking this game should feel a similar way to how Metroid Prime 3 felt in terms of the sense of finality and scope and grandeur. As a matter of fact, the original idea I made for Metroid 5 back before Dread was revealed, that I'm partially basing this video off of, was literally named Metroid Finale. I was 13 back then. I'd get better at this stuff as time went on. Believe me, I had to rewrite like 90% of that original draft for this video. I did have some pretty good ideas mixed in there though, hence why I'm making this video at all. Then there is one more thing to address before we start running through the game itself, and that's the whole Japanese mistranslation thing for Fusion and Other M. People are always saying that in the Japanese version of Metroid Fusion and Other M, it was only a small rogue faction in the Federation that was doing all the corrupt experiments on the BSL, and that the entire Federation being corrupt was only in the localized versions of the game due to a serious mistranslation. However, I am here to tell you that this supposed mistranslation in Metroid Fusion was severely over-exaggerated. Not Other M, that game had a horrible localization, and in that game, I think it actually was just a rogue faction that was cloning Metroids and Mother Brain as far as I'm aware. But I personally read the Japanese version of Metroid Fusion, and I was surprised to find that it wasn't a small rogue faction at all. They never said that. It just went from being the entire Federation to just the Federation military, with some higher-ups in the Federation at large still implied to be at least complacent with some of this stuff. And that distinction makes sense in any translation of the game. Of course the military would be the ones in charge of making bioweapons. I don't imagine it would make sense for the Federation Department of Education to be the ones trying to weaponize the SAX, do you? Now, the Japanese version of Other M may have somewhat recontextualized the Japanese version of Fusion, but you know what? Other M isn't canon to this game's story because I say so. Let's go on with this 5-part story of the Metroid saga. 5 parts and no other parts. No other M's in between. Prime Trilogy is still there, though. Alright, now that that tangent is over, we're on to the fun part. Progression and story. As I said, Samus' suit has healed to normal form since Metroid Fusion, but she's also lost all her upgrades besides the basic set over the months during her time on the run. So now, with this set of upgrades, she sets out into the game's first area, Livor Canyon. This area is rocky, with the stone being colored light cyan with occasional patches of purple grass, and a green sky in the background. This area is quite short with only some fairly basic enemies, just a few hostile alien birds and crabs. It's essentially a tutorial section, and there aren't any upgrades. Instead, your progression through this area is largely linear, as initial sections of Metroid games often are. But there are still some parts where you need to find like destructible blocks to move forward, and other parts where you'll need to blast up part of the wall, which will cause a cave-in that causes an opening to form somewhere else you've already been to, so there's still some minor backtracking. This area doesn't have a map aside from what you fill in by traversing naturally, since there's basically no sign of civilization out here, but Adam sets a waypoint marker in a different area to the west for you, as he says that that's where some of the Chozo ruins are, and the Federation has an archaeology operation working to dig up all the Chozo tech they can find. Samus may be able to find some good suit upgrades buried around here that she can use to build herself back up to full power. At the very end of Livor Canyon, near the entrance to the Chozo ruins, you'll find a Chozo statue that provides you with the only upgrade in this area, the Grapple Beam. Using the Grapple Beam, you can leave Livor Canyon behind for basically the whole game, unless you're planning to go for 100%. And you can make your entrance into the first major location of the game, Vareth Ruins. Adam will pop up with optional scan information on these ruins if you wish. The Vareth were a tribe of the Chozo who focused a lot of their efforts primarily on farming and nature. This is evidenced by the fact of just how naturalistic these ruins are. Many of the buildings and architecture are made out of plants or trees that were specifically grown in shapes that work as buildings. Even the buildings that are carved in stone or concrete are overgrown with plant life. The Chozo on this planet ended up leaving for elsewhere after the Federation started building a base on this planet and started taking advantage of their neighbors. The entrance you take to the Vareth ruins is mostly empty of Federation activity, since most of the archaeology operation here is on the other side of the ruins for now. But you do find a few Federation storage crates next to a few Marines who are pretty easy to dispatch. There's also a map station here where you're given the full layout of Vareth ruins. Adam pipes up and states that the east side of the ruins is mostly untouched, but you'll find more Federation activity the further west you travel. Adam also tells you about 2 more areas of note that connect to Vareth ruins. The first one is a cave network deep beneath Vareth ruins that the Federation decided to repurpose into a subterranean factory for the analysis and engineering of the Chozo technology discovered in the ruins above. And the second one is the east wing of the main Federation base located on Vareth, located a bit further west of the Vareth ruins. Adam sets a waypoint to Vareth base, saying that this is where he'll be able to access the information about the Federation's supposed discovery from the BSL that they found near the ruins of planet SR3D8. But he tells you that the main entrance on the other side of the ruins will be too secure. Because of this, Adam will suggest instead finding a second entrance through the subterranean tunnels where the Federation factory is located. This initial portion of Vareth ruins is open to explore, and you find the spin boost and spread beam after a while. There is a basement section of the ruins, but it's too hot to survive in and you can't visit them yet. Eventually, the game sends you down a path that leads you on towards the part of Vareth ruins that the Federation occupies. This part of the area has a lot of digging and scanning equipment around, and there's a few Federation security drones and Marines here to attempt to do battle with you. Some of these Marines try to attack you with blades of plasma, and not long after exploring the occupied section of the ruins, you'll end up finding one of the Federation's weapons that are compatible with your suit. The Blade Beam! This game's main gimmick is now in motion. Melee combat is now an option. Congrats! Using this upgrade, it's not too difficult to slash your way through all the Federation's defenses in this area, but you'll notice that they've locked down all the doors leading into the deeper parts of their archaeology operation. You're able to loop back around here and head up to a location way at the top of the Fezeth ruins, where a force of Federation Marines have apparently been dispatched to. At the top of the tower, you see why they were sent here. As atop the ruins, there is a giant alien bird monster dubbed Aviaris that appears to be the guardian of the Fezeth ruins. You arrive just in time to see the Federation Marines be slaughtered by this beast before it turns its attention to you. This is the first boss of the game, and after you deal enough damage to it, the bird monster recognizes you as a Chozo warrior, bows its head in respect, and flies away to leave you to your mission. After this, you find the upgrade it was guarding, the Vareth suit. The Vareth suit allows you to finally go down to the flaming basement section of the ruins, the background of which is ripe with murals that seem to depict the Fezeth tribe of the Chozo. It shows them being oppressed and eventually exiled by a second group of Chozo, one that resembles crows and seems to be very warlike, led by an especially tall Chozo warrior draped in power armor. Anyways, while down in this area, you get the wave beam. And using the wave beam, you're able to enter in through one of the locked doors in the area occupied by the Federation, and this will lead you to an elevator that will take you down to the next area, Umis Caverns, where the Federation made their underground engineering workshop. When you first enter the caverns, you end up in a more naturalistic part, with blue mushrooms growing underground and spores floating freely. But to your right, you'll find the entrance to the facility. The factory in Umis Cavern seems to be still under construction, meaning most of the factory machinery and engineering equipment is set up in the cave with some extra walls added rather than this place having been a fully carved and surfaced facility with complete rooms. Quite yet. Meaning, you get to enjoy the natural beauty of this cave combined with exploring a Federation tech factory. You get the spider magnet very soon after entering the facility, and it allows you to explore it more robustly. One of the most common exports of this factory seems to be security robots, as seen by how there is a plethora of them down here who are attacking you. Being a literal factory, there's 3 upgrades down here for you to find. The wide beam, the shock bombs, and the flash shift. Once you get the flash shift, you loop back around to this area's entrance again, and this time you're able to use the flash shift to go left while you couldn't before. This leads you down to a part of the cave that seems mostly free of Federation interference, and is just a clean path west for a little while, with nothing but a few mushroom-based enemies that live down here. Eventually, however, you find the entrance to what looks like another underground Federation facility. Except this one looks to be complete, and the door is fully sealed off. Nothing a shot with the wave beam can't get you through though, just like in Fusion's restricted section. This section features none of the natural parts the rest of Umis Caverns had. It's a fully completed Federation facility colored grayish red. This place is dark and moody, giving off strong Fusion vibes. It's the one part of the game that breaks the rule I said earlier about how this game wouldn't be dark and moody. And for good reason. This facility only has a couple of security guards and drones for you to dispatch, and it's mostly empty. There's also some scientists running around, but they flee quickly after seeing you, and you're not able to kill them. In the background are these stasis tanks holding some of the life forms that have been living on the planet, except they look weirdly corrupted and mutated. The scanners that have been giving you information on all the other areas before are dead silent here. Then eventually, after a little bit of time is spent exploring this strange facility, you enter one room where the exit and entrance door suddenly lock. One of the stasis tanks in the background suddenly deactivates and lets one of the mutated wild creatures out. The creature attacks you, and naturally the player will try to kill it immediately, which will lead you to find out exactly why this thing is mutated. Destroying it will reveal an X-Parasite. How the hell did the Federation get their hands on these? Weren't they all destroyed with SR-388? The doors unlock and all the other stasis tanks in the rest of the rooms deactivate, leading to Samus having to fight all the other X-Parasites in the facility. Samus's scanners finally kick in and tell us about this place. The area is Epidemia Labs, an X-Parasite cloning and testing laboratory which was built shortly after the BSL incident. All of the scientists and security personnel who work in this laboratory, along with many of the personnel who work in other parts of the base, have received the METROID DNA vaccine in order to prevent a potential outbreak of infection in case the X break containment. Since this game replaces Dread in the timeline, the METROID vaccine doesn't mutate everyone who takes it in this version of the canon. Something else that's different in this version of the canon, the BSL station wasn't the only place where the Galactic Federation was storing METROID DNA. It's where they were doing the actual METROID breeding program, but remember that Samus wasn't on the BSL station when she was given the METROID vaccine. So, the Federation had some extra METROID DNA stored at their headquarters, which they replicated and used to make more vaccines so they could ensure the scientists who were experimenting on the parasites remained immune. Eventually, Samus drops into what looks like some kind of training area with a few scientists up in an observation deck in the background pushing buttons. This results in a large sealed door opening and a massive mutated beast that looks like it used to be one of the normal mushroom enemies out in Uma's caverns, but it has since mutated to a far greater degree than the other hosts, and has grown exponentially. It even has the power to release explosive spores. This is the Misrumus X, our second boss, and when you defeat it and absorb the core X inside, it nets you the super missiles. Once you get the super missiles, the scientists at the controls hit the buttons to lock down most of the laboratory in order to prevent you from destroying all of their work with the X. You're able to head back through the only unblocked route to a super missile door, which leads to an elevator that will take you out of this horrific laboratory and up into the east wing of Vareth base, right near where Adam set that waypoint marker earlier. Here, you'll find a data room connected to the base's central mainframe. You plug Adam into the computer, and he finds the file you came here looking for. The one that tells you what happened outside the remains of planet SR-388. The video shows footage from a satellite that was following the BSL's trajectory. The footage shows the BSL hurtling towards SR-388, but then it zooms in real close onto a part of the outer hull, showing something inside the station was banging against the hull of the ship. The hull eventually breaks open, and we see the creature that did this get blown out the side of the ship and into space. It was Neo Ridley. Ah yes, one of the only X-hosts who can survive in space, as we know from one of their previous appearances. And naturally, the Neo Ridley we defeated in Fusion wasn't the only one, since as we know, these fuckers multiply. Neo Ridley manages to escape the BSL and is blasted into space just before it's too late, and immediately after we see Samus' ship escaping and the station blowing up the planet. Though he can hold his breath out here, Neo Ridley can't exactly move around in the vacuum of space without his cybernetic augmentations, so we watch him awkwardly squirming around for a few seconds. But then, the Federation ships that were heading towards the BSL arrive. The footage cuts from the satellite view to the view of one of the other ships, as we hear some of the ship's passengers exclaim their surprise about how both the BSL and SR-388 have suddenly gone kaboom. After a while of us seeing the Marines freak out, however, Neo Ridley starts blasting balls of plasma at them and is subsequently spotted. The ships move into engage and begin firing, and while Ridley does manage to destroy one of the ships that gets too close, he's not able to do much in the vacuum of space, and eventually the damage causes him to revert to Core X form. The Federation ships realize what they've just found, so they extend a containment unit from one of their vessels and seal the Core X inside of it, before retracting the containment unit back into the ship, turning tail back to HQ. Ready to report what happened to the BSL? And what they found. Cut out of the video. Adam addresses Samus and informs her of the obvious. While her actions during the BSL incident did most likely save the galaxy, since if Samus hadn't intervened, the Federation Marines would have been infected, and the X would have used their ships to consume all life in anywhere they could reach in ships. But while she did manage to prevent that from happening, she did fail to ensure the total extinction of the X, as the Federation managed to capture one that escaped its doom in the vacuum of space. On top of that, the X who managed to escape just so happened to be the one that was mimicking one of the most ruthless, bloodthirsty, and havoc-wreaking beings in the galaxy, who also just so happens to be Samus's nemesis. And that devastating creature is now in the hands of the Federation. Oh, and since some of you are probably wondering how the hell Ridley's corpse was even on the BSL in this version, since Other M isn't canon to this game as I stated, here's the explanation I'm going with. It's on the screen. If we're being real here, Ridley didn't really have much of a place in Fusion at all, and his presence there was a nostalgia shoehorn of the highest caliber. But this plot thread actually gives Neo Ridley a reason for existing. He's now the catalyst for the Federation's X experimentation project. Speaking of this project, Adam downloads all of the Federation's classified files on the Metroids and X parasites that he can manage to access here. And he tells you that it is most certainly enough to sink the Federation military if it comes to light. He tells you a little about what he found, including plans to attempt replicating the X's abilities of perfect mutation into non-X hosts to make perfect weapons of war that don't have to worry about spreading the plague. They also have plans to drop the X onto planets who rebel against the Federation, which will subsequently lead to the rebelling planet being consumed. The Federation military will then cover this up as a freak plague outbreak, and the Federation will be considered heroes after quarantining the planet to stop the spread. Then they also have plans to see if the Metroid DNA from the vaccines can be used to give the Metroid's ability of draining life force to other creatures. They have an undergoing project to see what happens when you give the Metroid vaccine to an X-host that's already fully infected. And Adam finds the name of the military commanding officer in charge of this entire program. 4-star General Alexander Darenhai, which is the name and rank I'm giving to this one guy we saw in the cutscene in Fusion. This is the guy. This is the bad Federation guy at the top of it. This is the dude in charge of all these bad experiments. Adam tells Samus, now that she's hacked into their system, both the X Laboratory and the rest of Vareth base have gone on lockdown. Federation reinforcements will probably arrive soon, and Samus should make her leave before they can arrive and potentially overwhelm her. Soon, Samus will need to steal a ship from the base and get off-world so she can anonymously leak the documents and expose the Federation military. But first, Adam gives her a new objective she'll need to complete first. Destroy the underground X Laboratory, and make sure that each and every one of the X there are destroyed. The X are too powerful and too dangerous to be allowed to remain in the hands of the corrupt Federation, and even if you inform the public of what the military is doing, they're unlikely to just give up such a powerful asset the second they're exposed. Now, the destruction of the X here must be done personally and immediately. So Adam instructs Samus to find a way to break into the lab again and destroy each and every one of the X parasites for good. After that quite lengthy cutscene, the game lets you explore a bit of the east wing of Vareth base, but not very much of it as the base has gone on lockdown since you hacked their computers, and everything requires power bombs to open. The way back to Epidemia Labs has also been locked down. You are, however, able to find the tram that takes you back out to the Fezeth ruins. You're now allowed to explore the part of Fezeth ruins that you couldn't before, the part that's been entirely stripped to the bone and is full of Federation archaeological equipment. In this area, you're given the proximity bouncer, which you can use to get out of the big cramped archaeology area and back out into the rest of Fezeth ruins. You can explore around a bit, get some optional upgrades, but for progression you need to go down into the Umis caverns from here. Also, one weird thing, while you're exploring the Fezeth ruins, you occasionally catch a glimpse of what looks like some kind of metal-clad figure following you in the background. Weird. Anyways, you go down to Umis caverns, and if you try to go from the caverns into Epidemia Labs, you'll find out that they've dropped an extra blast door over the entrance that will only open through the speed booster. So, with nowhere else to explore, you head to the factory in Umis Caverns, where you can now explore a little bit more now that you have the super missiles and the proximity bouncer. After a little bit of exploring through the factory, you end up breaking into another, more naturalistic part of the Mushroom Cave, where you can find the place to obtain the speed booster. Awesome, now you can head back to Epidemia Labs. As you're on your way back, however, what looks like a Federation soldier in a Chozo power suit jumps out and blocks your path. This is your third boss, the Federation Super Hunter. The Galactic Federation used some of the Chozo technology they found in the Fezeth ruins to make a prototype for their own Chozo power suit, and this soldier is the result. It's a pretty difficult fight, designed somewhat akin to the Chozo robot soldiers in Dread, and beating the soldier gets you the storm missiles. Anyways, with the speed booster, you're now able to enter into Epidemia Labs again, and explore it more properly this time using the super and storm missiles to open more doors. Once you re-enter the lab, you're shown a cutscene that shows the main part of Vareth base, where a large number of ships are taking off from the spaceport and leaving the planet, with no explanation why. Looking further into the laboratory, you see deeper levels of the experimentation the Federation has been doing down here, with many more larger mutated creatures and habitation areas where the larger X-hosts are able to live in their home environments. Of course, this place also has a lot of drones and elite security guards who have been vaccinated, plus they keep setting loose some X to fight you. You even see incubation tanks in the background that contain larger core X parasites. This laboratory appears so large that after enough traversal, you find yourself underneath what looks to be the west wing of Vareth base. Near the end of this area, you find yourself already encountering boss number 4, a giant purple tree monster that resembles some of the plant life you found on this planet already, now infected by the core X parasite. This thing is ruthless, constantly attacking you with its roots, and it even has what looks like some organic Federation machinery bonded with its skin, which will allow this tree monster to shoot lasers at you and drop heavy-duty explosives. Quite brutal. After Samus defeats this boss, she's caught by a security camera unbeknownst to her, and we get a look at none other than General Darenhai observing her from his quarters in who knows where. Once you absorb the Core X though, you get the Power Bombs, a much needed and beloved commodity. The Power Bombs allow you to explore a new part of Epidemia Labs, one that shows a very large experimentation room with an incubation tank in the background. Samus's auto scanners boot up here and give us the rundown. This testing room was the room where the Federation did their very first X experiments with Neo Ridley. At first they were just duplicating other X parasites out of Neo Ridley, but Neo Ridley was also the Federation's test subject on discovering what happens when you inject a fully fledged X-host with Metroid DNA. Initial hypotheses speculated that doing this would result in either the death of the parasite entirely, or the infection would clear and the host would be resurrected. However, what actually happened shocked them. The Metroid DNA started by spreading throughout the host and caused parts of it to wither and die, but the X-parasite defended itself by blocking out the parts of the body with the Metroid vaccine and regrowing the portions of itself that had been purged. Eventually, the Metroid vaccine would manage to eat through past the parts that had been blocked out, and would absorb more of the host body, only to be cut off again as the host regrew itself again uninfected. The scientists fed Neo Ridley as much organic matter as they could during this time, curious to see what this would lead to if the host body could keep regrowing itself. Eventually, the X-parasite caused the host to mutate further to fight and stave off the Metroid cells, and the Metroid cells themselves began to mutate after fighting and absorbing the X for so long, causing the parts of the body it took control of to grow Metroid-like instead of simply dying like they were at the start. This continued until eventually, the Metroid and X portions of Ridley's body reached a stalemate and a sort of balance, turning Ridley into a never-before-seen hybrid of Metroid and X-parasite. The X had mutated his body even further than it had before, leaving him a horrific beast, but the Metroid DNA had also grown and mutated the host, leading to Ridley now somewhat resembling a Metroid and having access to the energy-draining powers that Samus would eventually possess herself in Metroid Dread. Additionally, something unthinkable happened alongside all of this. The Metroid DNA allowed Ridley to get his mind back from the X-parasite. Ridley himself is now in control of the body, it's not just the X-parasite. This new form of Ridley, now appropriately dubbed Hyper Ridley, for how friggin' powerful it is, made an escape attempt after its transformation was complete, but was thankfully able to be contained due to how high security Epidemia Labs are due to the possible threat of the X escaping. Ridley despises the Federation and was extremely aggressive when he found out he was being held in a Federation facility, but that changed when General Darenhai himself came down and made a deal with Ridley. Hyper Ridley would be instated as a force of mass destruction for the Federation military, and sent on missions where the military needed his expertise of mass and merciless slaughter. Missions like these would be somewhat frequent, as the military has plans to tighten their grip on the galaxy, and they do expect there may be backlash. But of course, Hyper Ridley would be given another task in return, one that he desires the completion of oh so greatly. Destroy Samus Aran. After much thought, Hyper Ridley agreed to this, and is now stationed on the GFMS, Galactic Federation Mothership. After you leave this room, whether you decide to read all that information on Ridley or not, you see another cutscene that happens on the planet's surface. A few more ships take off from the port, and the camera follows them up into the sky where suddenly a massive Federation ship comes out of hyperspace above the planet. This thing takes up a decently big portion of the sky and the ship's dock. Once this cutscene wraps up, Adam comes and tells you to head to the surface of the planet because something big appears to be happening. Right next to this room is an elevator that brings you right up to the west wing of Vareth base. You start out inside the base, but after only a few rooms, you're brought up to the deck above the base, where light snow appears to be blowing in from the west, but the sky above you is still plenty visible. You can see this massive ship up in the sky, and not long after walking along this outdoor deck, you see a cutscene trigger where what looks to be the last ship flies out from the spaceport and to the massive ship, and once the ship flies far away enough from the planet, the cutscene shows a large mechanical tower that looks like some kind of force field emitter activate, and you see as some kind of energy field begins to cover up the entire outer area of Vareth base. We then cut down to Epidemia Labs, where all of the doors suddenly unlock and open, and all the containment units for the X-Parasites are opened. Cut back to gameplay, where you're permitted to explore around the west wing of Vareth base a little bit more, but after a few rooms, you're suddenly attacked by the X. Before long, the entire base is absolutely filled to the brim with mutant creatures. While you're running through this gauntlet out on the deck of Vareth base, you'll notice a small distant flash of light and movement out in the distant sky where the massive ship is. Shortly after this, you'll see a distant figure out in the sky where the giant ship is, too far away to make out properly, but slowly approaching. Once this distant figure starts to get almost close enough to properly see, it flies up and out of view. Then, a few rooms later, you see exactly what it was in the distance, as it makes a horrible scream that could be heard for miles before flying up in front of Samus. This is Hyper Ridley, in all his horrifying and abominable glory. He looks horribly mutated, and has grown both a second tail and a second spike on the back of his head. Its skin is a horrible mixture of colors. It even has some light cybernetic augmentation, though not very much, less than Proteus even. Only just enough cybernetics to do things like properly breathe and move around in space so it could fly here from that giant ship, and a signal transmitter to tell the defense satellites that it's authorized to fly in this airspace without getting blasted. Anyways, this serves as boss number 4.5. And I say 4.5 because this is less so a real boss fight and more so a cinematic battle like your fight against Ridley on Ceres Space Colony. Hyper Ridley just wails on you and takes 0 damage from anything but the plasma beam, which you do not have. After you've taken enough damage, he picks you up and demonstrates his new METROID Drain ability on you. Though it only partially works because you also have Metroid DNA. Frustrated, Ridley utters a single gravelly word. His first voice line in the entire series.
Samus.
He then tosses you in the air and blasts you with an extremely powerful laser from his mouth. Oh right, I forgot to mention. His cybernetic augmentations also include some weaponry. Like, a massive death laser. Anyway, Ridley laser blasts you off into the far distance. Samus lands in a snowbank miles away. Only 10 points of energy left. She finds herself in a new area called Tundra Mountains, the last location on Vareth. Adam pipes up and gives you the rundown on what's happening since it's a bit difficult to piece together. Now that you've thoroughly compromised Vareth base, the Federation decided it wasn't worth risking all their forces on a hunter known for toppling entire terrorist bases. So, the Feds evacuated the base, made sure any possible method of escaping the planet were taken with them, and then set the X loose hoping they would be enough to overwhelm you. The large energy field surrounding the surface of the planet seems to be some kind of containment field that set up a specific energy frequency that the X seem to dislike. Meaning it's essentially a shield covering most of the map that contains X-Parasites, but nothing else. That massive ship in the background was the Galactic Federation mothership. where both General Darrenhigh and Hyper Ridley are stationed. Hyper Ridley, being invulnerable to any weapon short of the plasma beam, which once again you don't have, and being the only X capable of passing through the containment field, because of all this, just all this in general. Yeah, he can pass through the containment field. Anyway, he was sent to Vareth base so that he could take out Samus, and the feds could send the X back into containment. After Hyper Ridley's attack, Samus landed out in the mountains on the west side of Vareth base, just outside the containment field. She won't have to worry about X out here until she gets back inside the shield, but she'll need to hurry. The shield transmitter is inside Vareth base, and if the X manage to find and destroy it, they'll be able to shut down the containment field and take over the whole planet. So, Adam sets a waypoint marker towards Vareth base, and Samus commences exploring Tondara Mountains. Tondara Mountains is a very large area, both quite open and containing some immense verticality. The higher areas are snowy, while the lower parts of these mountains feature a landscape made up of light blue rock. There's a few small Federation storage areas in these mountains, but they seem mostly abandoned. When you go out to the higher outer edges of these mountains, there tends to be a lot of wind and hail, which pushes Samus around and deals damage to her, preventing her from going too high. That is, until you enter one of the storage areas and find the Hurricane Suit, an upgrade developed by the Federation people working out here to handle the extreme weather at higher altitudes. You get this in this game instead of the Gravity Suit. I wanted to mix up the suits a bit. This allows you to explore some of the more elevated areas, though some of them are still too steep and may require the space jump for you to properly navigate. While you're out here, you can see atop one of the mountains that there looks to be a large building on one of the mountain peaks. Continuing on though, you eventually end up entering an underground man-made area at the base of one of the mountains and find some kind of storage transportation area. In one of the rooms down here, you find a dark room with a containment unit that holds a large Metroid. Yeah, since the Federation had more Metroid vaccines, it only makes sense that they'd still have a few of these lying around too, wouldn't it? Elsewhere, someone hits a button on a command console, and the containment unit breaks open and the Metroid comes out for you to battle it, except you don't have the Ice Beam right now, or Ice Missiles, so you gotta run. Like Hyper Ridley, this thing can't drain you properly because you yourself have Metroid DNA, but it's still a threat. Later in the room, you hit one of those pressure plate doors that work with the flash shift, and you're able to block the Metroid off behind you so it can't follow. After this part, you find a tram track that takes you out to Vareth base, and there you go, you're back in Vareth base. Up to this point, you've only been given time to explore tiny portions of Vareth base before having to leave and go elsewhere, but now the entire west wing and a good portion of the east wing is finally open to you. The whole place is infested with BX, and the containment field is constantly hanging over the backdrop of this area. If you explore around the map more, you'll find that the containment field pretty much stretched from the very edge of Tondara Mountains out through most of Fezzik Ruins. You're not going to hit the other edge of the containment field unless you get to the canyon you started at, pretty much. Anyways, the main direction you're meant to be going through right now is through Vareth base, primarily the west wing, but a little bit of the east wing. The west wing is mostly grand outdoor fortifications and the like. A lot of defense turrets and now empty shipyards are out here. Meanwhile, the east wing is where a lot of the indoor stuff is. Armories and command rooms and computer areas and the like. While in the west wing, you'll have to periodically hide from the gaze of Hyper Ridley, who's patrolling the skies in search for you. Back when I pitched my idea for Metroid 6, there was a sequence where a Chozo-built Ridley robot was chasing you along the rooftop of a robotics base, and you had to do a chase sequence to run away from a long stream of burning deadly flames that Ridley was breathing at you. Here, you'll need to do the same thing on multiple occasions, except replace the flame stream with that death laser that the Federation hooked Hyper Ridley up with. While in this area, you'll get your hands on the diffusion missiles. Except since you don't have ice missiles here, the diffusion missiles give you a larger explosion area on regular missiles rather than a freeze area. As you approach the top of Vareth base, you'll notice that the containment field in the background is beginning to glitch and flicker in and out. Something is attacking the shield generator. Samus reaches the top of the tower on Vareth base's west wing and finds the shield generator is being attacked by what looks to be Aviaris, the giant bird guardian of the Fezeth ruins and this game's first boss, except it looks heavily mutated now. It would appear that Aviaris has unfortunately been taken by the X, and now it's time for a rematch as boss number 5. And now that Aviaris is super mutated and such, 65-70% of its attacks are completely different. It's the same boss as before, but it's also not. It's pretty different. This is a pretty different fight. It's unfortunate to have to take out the Guardian of the Ruins, but it's fallen into the enemy's hands now, and you have to keep the shield from being destroyed. Absorbing its Core X gives you the space jump. Adam congratulates you on protecting the shield generator, but informs you that you'll still need to find a more permanent solution to get rid of the X on the planet. He'll bring up the Metroid you found in Tundra Mountains, and he'll say how it probably wasn't the only one. The Federation probably has a larger cloning program set up somewhere in these mountains to replace the one that was destroyed in the BSL incident, and since it's in Tundra Mountains, they're probably using the area's lower temperature to keep the Metroids docile. As the Metroids are the unnatural predators of the X, Adam suggests setting the Metroids loose within the containment field. This won't exterminate the X entirely, as seen when they were first let loose on SR388. There's always some stragglers, but it should vastly reduce their numbers and their chances of escaping, making them a much lesser threat. So Adam sets a new map marker near the top of Tundra Mountains, and tells you to set loose the Metroids, who should sense their unnatural enemies nearby and come straight for Vareth base. With the space jump, you're able to get to some higher platforms that you couldn't reach before, and from there you find an elevated train that will take you back to the Tundra Mountains. Since this area was so steep and you now have the space jump, traversing it has become a lot easier, and you can get to plenty of areas that you couldn't before. This includes the building on top of the mountain I mentioned earlier, as when you enter it, you discover that this is where the Federation had their Metroid breeding facility built. This place is much more crudely set up than the breeding station on the VSL was. That place had a whole recreation of SR388 built to give the Metroids the best habitat possible, while this place is just a cloning facility they made to replace the old one. In one of the first rooms you enter, you'll encounter a large screen where we get a look at a shadowy military officer looking down at Samus. Adam will quickly identify this man as General Darenhide. You've done an impressive job at destroying our experiments so far, but it is no use. We are no mere space pirates, Miss Aran. The Federation is far too great a force for you to go up against. Samus responds by shooting the screen with a missile. The info from the autoscanners will tell you that the Federation built this base so high in the mountains so that the cold would keep the Metroids docile, and that in this breeding facility they've started a new type of environment. New customized Metroid mutations. That can't be good. Since it's not replicating SR388's environment, most of the Metroids here are in their larval state, although you'll notice that some Metroids seem to be mutated in weird new ways that you've never seen before. Luckily, all the Metroids here are in containment, so you won't have to worry about fighting them yet. After a while of looking around, you'll eventually find a control console, and you can press the button to release all of the Metroids. Doing so, however, lets loose a particularly large beast that was in the containment chamber right next to you. This thing is about the same size as the Omega Metroid, but drastically different in shape. We'll call this the Iota Metroid, a result of the Federation's experiments on creating their own mutations of the Metroid species. This thing can't be harmed by any of your weapons, so you'll need to run. You'll have to run from the Iota Metroid throughout a good bit of the facility, encountering a few other smaller Metroids who are released along the way, although they won't attack you due to both your Metroid DNA and the colder temperatures keeping them docile. At the end of the chase sequence, you'll find a container holding the Ice Beam, which is the only weapon capable of destroying the creature. And you'll be able to turn around and battle the Iota Metroid as boss number 6. Once you beat the Iota Metroid, you'll see the rest of the Metroids leaving the facility, and when you exit yourself, you'll find that they're all headed inbound towards the X containment field, ready to fulfill the purpose they were made for in the first place: destroy the X parasites. When you return to Vareth base, you'll see that while there are still quite a few X around, their numbers have been significantly reduced thanks to the Metroids being around. Most of the smaller Metroids won't bother you because of your Metroid DNA, but the larger ones and the custom mutants will still try to attack you. though the Metroid DNA will also prevent them from doing too much damage. So they're not super tough enemies here, only kinda above average. Adam congratulates you, but he tells you that this is still only a temporary solution. Both the X and the Metroids are a great threat in the hands of the Federation military, and they must be destroyed. The best way to do this would be to blow Vareth base and the surrounding area within the containment field straight to hell. The best way to do that would be to take control of this planet's defense satellites and redirect them towards the base. Although doing this from the base would also blow up Samus, and Samus blowing herself up in this would leave the military unchecked to continue their experiments with Hyper Ridley acting as a base for more Metroid and X cloning. So instead, Samus will have to fly off-world and take control of the satellites through the mothership, which is parked above the planet right now. The Federation took almost all the ships with them when they left the planet, and of course your ship crashed. But while Adam was snooping around in the Federation database to find Samus the BSL footage, he found data on a high-class experimental gunship that had just finished being built. It's in a lockdown area of the base, so it's likely that the Federation just left it there thinking that the X wouldn't be able to get to it, rather than just taking it off-world with them. Adam marks its location on Samus's map and tells her to get over there and dig it out of its workshop so he can take you up to the mothership. The path to the gunship mostly takes you through the east wing of Vareth base, a part of the base you've only been through a little up to this point. This location has some pretty powerful X-Parasite mimics here, and only the more powerful ones, as the rest have all been flushed out by these mutant Metroids. There are also a few infected Marines around here, since even though all the live Marines who weren't vaccinated have left the facility, some of the corpses of the Marines you've already defeated had remained, free for the X to take. While you're on your way to the ship, you'll find the Plasma Blade, an upgrade to the Beam Blade that deals more damage, adds a piercing effect, a longer reach, and a wider sweeping area. The prototype gunship is at the top of the east wing, but it's in a lockdown room that doesn't have any exits large enough to fly it out of, and the entire roof of the area is covered in screw attack blocks. But nearby, there's a Skytram that will take you back to the Fezeth ruins, where you can use your new abilities to open a pathway to find the final upgrade you'll encounter on the planet's surface, the screw attack. With this, you can destroy the entire roof to the room with the prototype gunship, and from there, it's easy to get Adam to hack the ship and get her in the air. Space travel has been reobtained. As Samus is taking off, all the defense satellites suddenly point their weapons at her, despite the fact that this ship is supposed to be authorized for passage, but I guess Federation's onto you. And her ship is hailed by the GFMS. She finds herself face to face with General Darenheim, who gives her one final warning. Samus, you've been incredibly foolish thus far, but attempting to board the Federation mothership is brash, even for you. I must commend you on the information you've obtained on us thus far. When I first heard word of your arrival, I thought this mission of yours would be futile, yet you've come quite a long way. If you were to make your exit right now, you could have gone free for good. The Federation military would have been willing to pay a hefty sum for your silence, and the bounty on your head could have been removed. This is your last chance to turn around, Samus Aran. You have been an invaluable asset to us in the past. We do not wish to see you destroyed. I would advise against disobeying orders once again. Samus looks at the screen, then takes off her helmet, looks Darenheim in the eye, and shakes her head. Then she grabs the throttle and goes full speed ahead, books it to the ship while the satellites are still trained on her. Curiously, the satellites do not attempt to shoot her down though, which is a good thing because they would probably succeed. Instead, they appear to power off. Darenheim, who is still on the call, states, "Shame you feel that way, Samus. I'm afraid the consequences of the decision you've made will be far more severe than what the weapons defending this planet can do." Then, General Darenheim leaves the call, and Adam warns Samus that what appears to be a massive life form is approaching the gunship rapidly from behind. Samus swerves just in time to avoid being hit in the back, as Hyper Ridley blasts past her, then comes back around to engage her ship in combat. Initiate boss number 7, Hyper Ridley Rematch, and the first time you ever get to fight from the gunship in the Metroid series. While Samus's normal weapons weren't enough to harm Hyper Ridley, the weapons on this prototype gunship you stole are more than capable of doing so. This battle works somewhat like the Star Dream battle in Kirby Planet Robobot did, which is funny because these games would have been released in the same year. Huh. Pretty basic ship controls, just an on-rail shooter scenario with you using the circle stick to move and one button to shoot. You can keep hitting the button for individual blasts, or hold it down for a charged one. You need to use these weapons to defeat Hyper Ridley, who is flying up around ahead and using his ranged plasma attacks on you, sometimes also coming right up to the ship to attack with melee strikes. At the end of the fight, he'll even attempt to grab your entire gunship and use his Metroid Drain, and you'll have to blast him off your ship. After you blast Hyper Ridley off, you'll break some of his cybernetics, specifically his transmitter. With Hyper Ridley's transmitter offline, all the defense satellites reactivate as they're no longer receiving the signal that is authorized to be in Vareth airspace, which leads to all of the satellites shooting their lasers at Ridley all at once. Hyper Ridley fires back with all of his plasma and actually manages to destroy most of the satellites, but eventually all the lasers and missiles get to be too much, and Ridley's blasted into the side of the Federation mothership, and, just creates a huge hull breach. Hyper Ridley defeated! Since the mothership's onboard defenses seem to be preoccupied by the big Ridley-shaped hole in the side of the vessel, Samus is easily able to board the station. If you want to go for 100%, then fear not. You can still fly back and forth from Vareth Base as you wish. As you go through the area, you'll find that the entire ship is under a code red. There is a plethora of Federation Marines who head for your location, and all of them can be defeated with relative ease. Many of the doors on the ship have been locked down, however, so Samus is forced to take a roundabout route in order to navigate the base. While routing the mothership, Samus will end up near the bottom of the ship, and find an entire section of the ship filled with tons of different horrifyingly powerful creatures kept in stasis tanks, including some mutant Metroids. Samus's scanners state that the Federation has been collecting the most powerful wild creatures from across the galaxy for military applications. This is also where the Federation has been keeping their extra Metroids, so that they can clone more in case the ones on Vareth Base end up being destroyed by a certain meddling bounty hunter, or some other incident. But they were mostly worried about a certain meddling bounty hunter. Naturally, these monsters are released from their containment with the hope that maybe they could stop Samus. Samus will need to fight mutant Metroids, draconic crocodile creatures named Krazdins from a planet named Aran, spider creatures who are constantly jumping around and releasing small armies of bugs named Octohoppers from planet Spicopus, a sentient toxic extermination gas that follows you around the screen and deals massive damage when it's in contact with you, named Midorolus from planet Billium. Fun fact, Midorolus and planet Billium were actually both mentioned in a scan in a pirate observatory in Prime. This is a reference to that. And there's also many, many more. After extensively carving your way through bioweapon storage, you find yourself toe-to-toe with boss number 8, the cross-species mutant. You know all those enemies I just mentioned? This thing is what happened when the Federation scientists decided to clone all of them into one massive beast. It's got spider legs, a crocodile torso and head, and it's constantly exerting Midorolus gas from all of its orifices. You fight it and deplete its health, but once the actual fight is complete, there's a cutscene that shows it pinning Samus to the ground and breathing as much Midorolus gas onto her as it can manage. Samus is squirming to get free. She's getting a good bit of the gas in her, even through her suit, and it looks like she might be done for. But just as she's about to pass out, Samus's left hand lights up. A good bit of energy drains from the cross-species mutant, and it stumbles back in shock and then just remains sitting there as it recovers from literally getting some of its life force drained. Samus, unsure of what happened, gets up and shoots the mutant in the face with a bunch of super missiles. She then confusingly looks at her hand a little before then snapping back to attention and bringing us back into gameplay. Though the game doesn't fully explain it, attentive players will remember the same hand drain ability from Hyper Ridley, and they'll be able to piece together that this is an ability that comes from mutated Metroid DNA. Anyways, in the room behind this boss, you'll find a weapon chamber containing this game's final upgrade, the Plasma Beam. It's time to go to town! The Plasma Beam lets you go back up to the higher areas of the mothership, where you'll find teams upon teams of armed soldiers, and you'll be able to carve through all of them with ease. The further you get though, you'll find yourself encountering elites with heavy-duty guns or mech suits or even jetpacks, all integrated with a good amount of Chozo tech. It seems with all the archaeology work they've done in Fezeth Ruins, they've taken some of the Chozo weaponry and began to integrate it with some of their more trained soldiers on the Federation's #1 military battleship. These guys will be a good bit tougher. Then, after taking down a couple notably difficult elite soldiers, you'll enter the room where General Darenhai sits and wait. Inside the room, you'll see that Darenhai has quite the security force with him, but he tells them to stand down as you enter since Darenhai knows there'll be no match. Darenhai looks to Samus and says, "You've come far, bounty hunter. Too far, I'm afraid. It is my understanding that this little mission of yours was originally just to gain access to our data on the BSL incident, so you could release our information to the public and give us no choice but remove the bounty we've placed on your head. If you had stuck with that plan, it may have worked. You could have been free again. But now look what you've done. You've wiped out an entire military base, defeated a small army's worth of soldiers, destroyed millions of credits worth of research, and now you're about to attempt to take out a general in the Federation military. Leak as much information as you want, take me out of the equation, and it won't change a thing. You're not battling mere terrorists anymore, Samus. The Federation is too large and too vast for any single hunter to even dream of going against alone. Even you. While I may be the head of these projects, I assure you that the Galactic Federation at large has supported me through my endeavors, and if my work is destroyed, then there will be consequences, whether the public approves of our actions or not. Samus Aran, if you go through with this, if you complete your foolhardy mission against me, you will never be a free citizen of Galactic Society again. No matter how much information you expose, no matter how much public outcry we face for our experiments, and no matter how much support you've gained, the Federation military will never stop hunting you for what you've done here today. Are you really okay with letting that happen? Just to stop me? Samus looks at Darenhai for a moment, before wordlessly charging up her arm cannon and pointing it at him. Darenhai laughs. Fine then. I suppose you've made your choice plenty of times by now. I guess I still thought that someday you could become a reliable asset to us again. But of course, with the advances the Federation military has made, I don't suppose we need you anymore. Not when we have him. Kill her! Samus looks up just in time to see who Darenhai is talking about, as a still-alive Hyper Ridley drops from the ceiling and attempts to crush Samus, who narrowly dodges out of the way. Final boss, Hyper Ridley third fight. Ridley is visibly in quite bad condition from the massive amounts of damage he took in the gunship fight earlier, but despite all that physical trauma, he's still more than up to fight Samus again here, which just goes to show how unbelievably powerful this form of Ridley is. Just think the SAX and Metroid Suit Samus combined into one being, except instead of Samus as a base, it's Proteus Ridley. Anyways, this fight with Ridley heavily resembles his battle in Samus Returns, which, keep in mind, doesn't exist in this universe yet because this game comes out in 2016, except it's in a bit more close quarters. And Ridley's using both that giant laser he can fire now thanks to his cybernetics and his Metroid Drain ability. Ridley's definitely fighting a lot harder and with much more of his abilities than he was during your first encounter with him on Planet Vareth's surface. But since he's wounded from the gunship fight, and you have the plasma beam now, which can actually hurt him, it's about an even match. After the first phase, which is much longer than the first phase of the Samus Returns fight, I might add, because that one was super quick with the beam burst, we see a cutscene where Darenhai is outright barking orders at Ridley. What are you waiting for? She's nothing compared to you. Finish her! Ridley looks at Darrenhai with disdain, spends a couple seconds thinking, before then flying right up to Darrenhai and backhanding him, which sends the general flying across the room. Ridley's got Samus in his grasp now, and he's done taking orders from the Federation he despises. After that, Ridley then looks up at the ceiling and blasts his laser attack, causing large portions of the room to break apart and fall away, merging with different rooms. This begins Phase 2, where you fight Hyper Ridley in a much larger arena. This time, yeah, it's the size of the SR-388 fight. Ridley's attack variety widens in this phase, now shooting out electricity so he can attempt to Metroid drain you from a distance, using his plasma breath to set surfaces aflame for a period of time, and throwing tiny organic explosives at you that seem to be coming out of him, likely thanks to the X-Parasite inside of him. Additionally, the Federation military out and about on the rest of the ship seems to have some objections to what's going on here, so on many occasions a few security drones and Federation Marines enter the room who attack both you and Ridley. After you take down Ridley's second phase, he decides maybe retreating wouldn't be an awful idea. Hyper Ridley starts running through multiple walls, and the boss fight stops for a minute as you have to follow his trail of destruction for a bit. Eventually though, you find where the trail of destruction ends, the reactor room. Hyper Ridley has both his hands up against the reactor and is draining as much energy from it as he possibly can. While he's absorbing this energy with his Metroid powers, it actually gets fed to the X-Parasite he carries within him, which allows Ridley to mutate even further. Take how horrifying Hyper Ridley looked before, and double it. Hyper Ridley then looks at Samus, and does something he hasn't done in the entire series, aside from just a teeny tiny bit earlier in the game. He speaks.
I have been waiting a long time for this, cursed hunter. For years, you've plagued my brethren and I. For years, you've stopped the space pirates from reaching our fullest potential. For years, you've stemmed the slaughter. I am all who remains now, and it is only thanks to those slime balls in the Federation military and their experiments on that wretched parasite I was subjected to. Willing myself to work alongside that Federation filth was the hardest thing I have ever done. But it was all worth it, because now I can destroy the one person who's been haunting my dreams ever since she set foot in my lair all those years ago. Goodbye, Samus Aran. May dying be as painful for you as it was for me.
Time for Phase 3. Hyper Ridley's extra mutated now, and he keeps growing temporary appendages that he uses to attack you before then retracting them back into his body. He also starts releasing smaller X-Parasites out of himself, who turn into smaller mini Ridleys who die in only a few hits, but can be a real pain if not dealt with quickly. In terms of Hyper Ridley's Metroid powers, while before they couldn't really drain you that much because you also had Metroid DNA, now they hurt like hell. Oh, and I forgot to mention, some of the rooms that Ridley tunneled through to get to the reactor were rooms in the bioweapon storage area of the ship. A bunch of strong and angry creatures start coming into the room, Metroids included. But as soon as they're able to enter, Hyper Ridley simply eats them and uses them to heal slightly. All of Hyper Ridley's previous attacks are also used in this fight, and it's a very difficult phase to take on. Eventually though, you are able to deal enough damage to end the fight and trigger the ending cutscene. Hyper Ridley activates his Metroid hand and dives at Samus, who jumps out of the way. He ends up colliding with a bunch more creatures who just came in from the bioweapon area, and when his drain attack misses you, Ridley ends up stealing the life energy from all the creatures instead, save for one larval Metroid who was immune to the drain. Seeing Hyper Ridley use the Metroid attack yet again, Samus suddenly thinks of something. She flashes back to her earlier fight with the cross-species mutant, where when she was about to die, she accidentally used an ability just like Ridley's. Then we see more flashbacks, conveying to us something that Samus has just realized. Though many Federation scientists who worked with the X received the Metroid vaccine, the Metroid DNA given to Ridley caused him to mutate significantly more than everyone else because the core X inside of him fought back against the Metroid vaccine and caused the Metroid DNA to act more aggressively. But Samus has battled and absorbed a ton of X parasites at this point. She was even partially infected with the X when she received her Metroid vaccine. Metroid powers, just like Ridley's, manifested in Samus when she almost died earlier, so maybe? Samus runs up to the reactor, pushes her left hand up against it, and nothing happens. Just a moment later, though, Hyper Ridley rears its head around after missing earlier, and lets loose an ungodly roar at Samus. And the adrenaline rush that comes from seeing this horrifying sight manages to be enough to let Samus' hand light up and begin slowly draining energy from the reactor. The energy Samus drains from the reactor gets routed straight into her arm cannon, and she begins using it to charge up an extra powerful blast as Ridley slowly approaches. Just as Ridley rears his head and prepares to bite down, Samus delivers this hyper blast right into Ridley's cranium. She then dodges out of the way as Ridley falls to the ground from the blast and crashes straight through into the reactor. Hyper Ridley lets loose a horrible scream as the reactor's explosive power is delivered right into his body. And he begins to lose control of his Metroid powers and begins draining energy from the entire ship. Within 5 seconds, the ship loses its power, and the engines keeping it above the planet begin to fail. Hyper Ridley has been completely overloaded with energy and falls to the ground in a gray, withering heap, reverting to Core X form. Oh yeah, super safe to let someone with an X parasite inside them roam free on your mothership. Federation buffoons. Samus is currently sprawled out on the floor. Definitely not unscathed from that big reactor overflow happening right next to her, but she's able to slowly get up and take a look at the X-parasite that belonged to Ridley. She stares at it for a second, but before she's able to do anything, that larval Metroid who was in the area flies out and absorbs Ridley's X. The sheer power from the X causes this Metroid to almost double in size after absorbing it, and then it flies at Samus so she can be its next victim, but Samus simply blasts it with a fully charged Ice Beam before it can reach her, and then shatters it with a super missile. Then, cut back to gameplay, as it's time for an escape sequence. This ship's engines are failing after that incident with the reactor, and it's now on a crash course with Vareth base. Time to get out of here! Samus runs through the mothership, taking down any enemies she finds in her way, and eventually she reaches the ship she stole earlier. Before Samus can enter it, though, she gets shot in the back. She quickly recovers from this blast, and turns around to see none other than General Darenhai, badly wounded but still alive, sitting up against a wall, and pointing directly at Samus. Don't move, Hunter. If we're going down, you're coming with us. Samus just gives Darenhai a blank stare for a moment, before quickly drawing her arm cannon at Darenhai and blasting the gun out of his hands with a single power shot. She then gives him a simple wave goodbye, boards her ship, and flies away as the Galactic Federation mothership crashes into the surface of planet Vareth. Now, hate to disappoint you all, but unlike the PSL, this doesn't destroy the whole planet, as this ship's self-destruct device lost power when Hyper Ridley drained everything in his final moments. But since the mothership is huge, it is enough to make a pretty damn big crater, and the explosion destroys all of Vareth base and the surrounding areas. It basically destroyed everywhere on the map that you visited, taking all of the X and the Metroids with it. Mission complete. In the concluding moments, Adam tells you that the area of destruction from the mothership's crash reached well beyond how far and deep the containment field spanned, and that all of the X on the planet were definitely destroyed in the crash. You don't have to worry about that. Same story with the Metroids, as both their breeding program on the planet and their backup storage on the mothership have now been destroyed, and all the personnel who received the Metroid vaccine were stationed either on the planet or on the mothership when it crashed. So it looks like the Federation no longer has any access to Metroid DNA, so their Metroid breeding program is finished. However, Fahrenheit was right about how the Federation would not forgive her for this. They can expose the Federation military as much as they want now, and it won't matter. Samus has done far too much for the Federation to ignore, no matter how much support she gains in the public eye. But she won't necessarily be a fugitive forever. The Federation has needed to rely on Samus many times before, and now that all the research on biological superweapons have been destroyed, along with most of the research on Chozotech stuff, the next time the galaxy is threatened, they may have no choice but to come crawling back to Samus. She'll just have to wait. But for now, it's time to expose all the terrible things the Federation military has done. Adam readies the upload for all the classified documents he gathered while on Vareth, and then asks Samus, "Any objections, lady?" She has none, and so he uploads it. Roll credits. The credits are strewn with pictures of news reports that show us what happened in the outer world of Metroid after Adam leaked these documents. They show the public's surprise reaction to these documents' forensic verification, despite the Federation's claims that they're illegitimate and fake, headlines claiming that the Federation thought that getting their hands on a new bioweapon would be worth the risk of dooming the galaxy in Fusion, more headlines that explain to the public exactly what the X-Parasite is, because their existence was heavily classified, and even more headlines discussing the poor ethics and terrible dangers of the Federation's experiments on Vareth. Then there is a headline stating that the Federation chairman may be impeached for approving all these missions and experiments, and the final headline states that the Federation military has doubled the reward for the bounty on Galactic hero Samus Aran, despite mass protests against this. But then, we see the post-credit scene. Samus is contentedly resting in her new gunship when she receives a transmission from Galactic Federation headquarters stating, "Samus, this is the Federation. Though we have no right to ask this of you, we require your assistance on a very important mission. A great danger to the galaxy has come to light, and all our attempts to investigate have all ended in failure. The bounty on your head will be removed if you cooperate. What is your response?" Samus stares at the message for a second before punching in her reply. "Send me the details." The Federation's next message reads, "This recording was transmitted to us from the far reaches of the galaxy by an unknown source." And then below the text is the recording. It's the footage of the X-Parasite loose on planet ZDR. Samus seems taken aback by this recording, clearly shaken by it, but she regains her composure and responds, "Send me the coordinates." Game end. And that is Metroid Insurgence, my take on a version of Metroid 5 that focuses on the Federation. Maybe an E10 rating would be too much to ask for after all that. That got a bit dark at some points there, but you know what? If Fusion got an E rating, then we can manage it with a vibrant art style and a fun attitude. Clone Wars had some pretty freaking dark moments too, yet it still works great with younger audiences, alright? In terms of story, just like Dread, the X and the Metroid DNA are still involved here after Fusion, as I think Dread had the right idea here in that regard. The X definitely were not a single game threat. Not after the Metroids who were created to stop them got so many games focusing on them. The X deserve a full set of games. Fusion makes too much of a big deal out of them for them to only be in Fusion. It would kind of undermine their importance and kind of just sort of demean all of Metroid Fusion if they never showed up again and were just completely forgotten. They're too big a deal. This would mark an end to the story arc with the Metroids on their own as other creatures, but since Dread comes after this, the Metroid DNA stuff is far from finished. I also personally remember Ridley's return in 5 being a huge point of debate within the fanbase before Dread finally released without him, but as someone who was always in favor of his return, I believe this to be a great final send-off to the character. He's vital to the plot, he's present throughout the game, he gets proper characterization, and he's the most powerful he's ever been. This would most likely be his last appearance, but it would be a damn good one. Unfortunately, I didn't get much of a chance to fit too much new stuff into this game since the Federation filled up the main villain role, and everything else just continued right off of Fusion, but that's okay. I feel like this kind of direct lore continuation makes sense after the crap load of stuff that got dumped on us in Fusion. Oh, and I should probably explain how the hell this game's existence would change the games that come after it, shouldn't I? In this alternate universe, Next Level Games would likely move on to making Luigi's Mansion 3 after this, while Mercury Steam would pick up the mantle and deliver Metroid Samus Returns probably a couple years after this game launches. Most likely it would release on the Switch in 2018 rather than on the 3DS in 2017, since the 3DS would have already gotten a new 2D Metroid game only a year earlier. The extra year of development time would be so it could work on an HD system, and because I think Samus Returns just needed more time to cook in general, it only had 2 years. That's really not much time. In terms of differences, since Insurgence's Hyper Ridley would be the final send-off to the character, Proteus Ridley would not appear in Samus Returns. This wouldn't be a huge loss though, as while not getting to see a Samus baby tag team against Ridley would certainly be tragic, a lot of the same mechanics from Proteus' boss fight would have been used in the Hyper Ridley fight anyway, and we don't want to have a repeat situation of the Game Boy Advance games, where all of Ridley's fights were just watered-down versions of his battle in Super. Instead, the Queen Metroid battle in Samus Returns would be altered to make it feel more like a proper final boss. Since honestly, that fight felt pretty mediocre to me, it didn't feel final at all. Add multiple phases, and give the later phases a larger arena with more dynamic movement than just being pushed against a wall. Have the player's space jump over this thing's head. As for Dread, I still think it would release in 2021, since Samus Returns' existing framework would be on Switch now and easier to work off of. In terms of story changes to Dread, we did see Samus' Metroid powers already manifest slightly in Insurgence, so instead of being a whole new revelation in Dread, Dread's instead just a game where they start to properly take hold of Samus after her encounter with Ravenbeak. Honestly, if I didn't still want Dread to happen after Insurgence, I would have just gone absolutely full throttle with the same Metroid abilities plotline and ending, with Samus going Super Saiyan and all that. But since I did want Dread to happen after, I just had the plotline start here, so Dread can go ahead and run with it. As we see Samus' Metroid abilities slowly manifest throughout Dread, it'll be less of a mystery since the audience already knows what they are, and it'll be more of an, oh shit, she's losing control thing that happens throughout the game. Oh, and I should probably explain the whole thing with the Thoha DNA suppressing Samus' Metroid powers, since other people get the Metroid vaccine in Insurgence and don't mutate. In this version of events, the Metroid vaccine, it doesn't mutate people normally, but it would have mutated Samus after all the X she'd found absorbed, since remember, the X are the natural enemies of the Metroids even more than the Machina are, if it wasn't for the Thoha DNA keeping it in check. Then, after she almost died on the mothership to that mutant, her Metroid powers started coming out a little in order to keep her alive, and then after she almost died again, this time to a living, breathing Chozo, her DNA started mutating rapidly and taking over. Since we do already know about the Metroid DNA stuff from Insurgence, I think it would be best to have it sort of start coming out earlier in the game and have it be more gradual rather than most of it being towards the end, because a lot of the fan base are probably expecting a lot of Metroid DNA stuff to be happening in Metroid 6. Maybe even have Samus' Metroid Drain ability be integrated into the gameplay as a move from the start. I suppose this universe's version of Prime 4 would also need to be changed substantially, since Federation Force would have never released because Insurgence happened instead, which means that Silex would have stolen a Metroid. Huh. Well, I can't really go over what that version of Prime 4 would be like, since we don't have Prime 4 yet, so, oh well. Thank you guys so much for watching my stupidly long idea for a sequel to a game that we already got a sequel to. Man, that was a long video. For those of you who are left, thanks for sticking with me all this time. I guess if you liked this video so much, subscribing would be greatly appreciated, since this shit takes forever. And that's an amount of time I do not have now that I am in college. Just writing this script alone took a whole week, and as I am writing this now, I know that editing is gonna be a nightmare. Yeesh. Please subscribe. I need this kind of stuff to be worth it to me. I love making these videos, but if I don't have anybody seeing them, then there's not really much point in it.